Good afternoon. My name is Casey Keene. I'm the Director of Programs and Prevention here at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to this webinar session entitled Strengthening Hope and Resilience in Children, Youth, and Mothers in Domestic Violence Programs, Lessons from Friendship Home. In my role at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, I have the privilege and joy of facilitating the Adult Children Exposed to Domestic Violence Leadership Forum. This project is led by a steering committee of 12 amazing activists and advocates representing various sectors impacting the movement to end gender-based violence, and all of them identify as having experienced domestic violence in childhood. We come together around a common goal with this project to make space in our movement for the voices and experiences of ACE-DV. Our project provides technical assistance, training, and guidance to support the development of approaches that are trauma-informed, culturally responsive, and asset-based. And while our stories are diverse and unique, our work centers around 6 core beliefs upon which members of the Leadership Forum agree. I'm going to read those beliefs to you because they are so central to our work. 1, that children exposed to domestic violence can heal and thrive. 2, that each of us should be allowed and encouraged to name our own experience. 3, that there's a difference between loving an abusive person and condoning their behavior. 4, that violence is learned and reinforced by societal norms, yet accountability and commitment to change can create a new path. 5, that our non-abusive parent was faced with limited and complex choices. And 6, that our unique experiences bring added value to the movement. Ultimately, the ACE-DV project wants to shift our practice paradigm to one that recognizes trauma as a common human experience, understands resilience as innate to each of us, and that reframes adverse childhood experiences from a post-traumatic growth model to one that honors and promotes the assets that these experiences have given us. And that's why I am thrilled to welcome today's presenter, whose practice model is built entirely on exploring and fostering survivors' strengths. Julie Havner serves as a counselor and coordinator of the Strength-Centered Advocacy Services at Friendship Home in Lincoln, Nebraska. Julie has over 16 years of experience as an advocate working directly with survivors and has a genuine passion for helping individuals discover and apply their personal strengths. Currently, as a licensed mental health practitioner, she provides strength-centered counseling to survivors at Friendship Home. As the creator of Friendship Home's Strength-Centered Advocacy curriculum, she also conducts training for programs who are interested in implementing the Strength-Centered Advocacy model. Julie presented at the Second World Conference of Women's Shelters in Washington, D.C. in 2012, and the Third World Conference of Women's Shelters in The Hague, Netherlands in 2015. On today's webinar, Julie will explore how the strength-centered advocacy approach can help to mitigate or repair some of the potential negative impacts of domestic violence on children and youth, while also strengthening protective factors that can lead to resilience across the lifespan. Julie, you now have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Casey, and thank you everybody who is in attendance today. I am really excited to have the opportunity and to share some time with each of you to talk with you about something that I feel very passionate about, and that is what we call strength-centered advocacy. This is an approach that we've developed over time, around 17 or 18 years of time at Friendship Home, and that I truly believe has the power to help transform lives. One thing I want to say is because survivors, including child survivors, are at the heart of what all of us do, I invite you, as I'm speaking today about this approach and you're thinking about your own experiences, I invite you to think about the women and children and other survivors, or possibly even yourself, and how this information applies to you, and honor the resilience of yourself and of all those individuals. So thank you again for being here. And here's yet another thank you. I always want to start out when I'm speaking with advocates to just really appreciate the powerful work that each of you do. I love this quote because it reminds me of some really critical pieces of advocacy work and the power of what we do. So this work that we do is part of a global movement to make the world a more safe and peaceful place, and it's an honor to connect with each of you today. I also want to acknowledge that each of us as advocates and all of our programs are inherently working from a strengths-based framework. So although I'm talking specifically about what Friendship Home is doing right now in our ability to try to help survivors tap into their unique talents and strengths, I also know that many of you are doing similar and different and creative work to do that very same thing. I do want to give you a little bit of context about Friendship Home because I know that programs are very different in size, resources, but I also know that there's similarities. And so Friendship Home is the program that I work for. We're located in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I'm giving you just a few pieces of information about the context of our program. So we currently have one communal living shelter, and that has 8 bedrooms. And back in about 2015, a little bit before, we started really moving to having private bedrooms for either families or individual survivors coming into shelter as part of our efforts to be more trauma-informed. So each one of those 8 bedrooms would have one individual or a family in it. We've also moved as part of that trauma-informed movement to having single-family shelters, and that has been pretty recent within the last few years. But we started out with 6, and now we have a total of 12 single-family shelters. And both of those consist of our emergency shelters, the communal and then the 12 single-family shelters. So our emergency shelter program is typically a 6 to 8 week stay for people. I know, as all of you know, that time goes really, really fast, and so there's a lot we're trying to do to help people during that 6 to 8 weeks. We also have 7 transitional shelter units for people, and that stay is typically around 6 months. It could be shorter or longer, depending on a person's individual needs, but we really try to focus on economic empowerment and helping people to feel like they can make that move into being completely on their own. And then in addition to those things, we also have a pre-shelter program, and that, for us, those are people that we may not have space for immediately, but we are constantly working to serve them to find temporary options for shelter until we can get them into our program. And then we also have a continued contact program, and that just means that we really keep an open door for survivors. We want to make sure that when people exit our program that they know they can always call back, they can come back for groups, they can call anytime, and we just try to continue to help them, again, because knowing that length of time that we're able to serve them is not long enough to typically have everything that we can offer to them. And then as far as services, I know that a lot of you offer the same type of support and services as we do. So we do have women's and children's advocacy both at Friendship Home. We have case management that is based on each survivor's needs that they present to us. We offer short-term mental health counseling. That's something that we added, and that's of course, part of my role. I do want to emphasize that that is completely voluntary and that I don't do any type of diagnosing. So it's really focused on empowerment and strengths and, again, just the type of support that people are needing as they're in our program. We also offer, as many of you do, women's and children's groups or survivor groups during their stay, and we have quite a few different ones that we have. And then the last one you see is obviously strength-centered advocacy, and that's what I'll be talking to you about today. And that approach is woven into all of the services that we have. So it's really something that we have built into different ways that we use it in each of these areas that I just shared with you. So just general goals for today's webinar. Obviously, as Casey mentioned earlier, we really want to highlight the power of resilience and focusing on strengths, and that's what I'm going to try to do throughout this webinar, because it's such a critical piece in the healing process for survivors. Clearly, I'm going to give you an overview of strength-centered advocacy and some of the Gallup tools that we have adopted as part of that approach for helping people discover their natural talent at any age. But really what I want to do, I guess maybe my main goal, is to really encourage you to have different thoughts, ideas, and really some inspiration in your role as advocates. And I really want you to also apply some of this to your personal life, because it is, it's really relevant in both our work and personal life. So that's what I really hope you leave feeling more inspired and maybe with some new ideas and things that you want to talk about with each other. So I want to start us today with some thinking about the power of having someone who believes in us, especially at those times when we may struggle to believe in ourselves. And so here's a quote that I think really highlights that. At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. So thinking back to your own childhood or your adolescence, I want you to identify an adult who sparked that sense of hope and belief in you. So I'm going to give you a few moments to kind of come up with somebody that you have in your mind. Once you have that person, I want you to think a little bit more about the following questions in regards to that person. So who was the person? What did they do? And what impact or how did it affect you? So think about that for a few moments. You can jot it down if you want, or you can just kind of have it in your mind. I am going to ask you to maybe text a few responses here in the next few slides. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you, if you're willing to do so, is just when thinking about the person that you identified from your childhood or adolescence, if you would be willing to share some of the characteristics or qualities of that person in the text chat. And then Casey will help me by reading those out and sharing some of your responses as you're doing those.
Okay, great. So I'm seeing some responses coming in that they were kind, loving, honest, supportive. He made me feel special and convinced I could do anything. More honesty, humor, loving, kindness, caring, emotionally available, demonstrated compassion, encouraging. I know for me, what I appreciated in that person was that they really listened and seemed to really be present with me in the moment. I'm seeing acceptance, intuitive, good listener, transparent, trustworthy, and honest. Believed in me and believed me as well.
Oh, those are great. Thank you so much for everybody who responded. And there's a lot of power in those words if we think about and have that reflection on somebody who had that impact on us. So thank you so much for some of those things. There were some common themes and then some that were, probably individualized for you. So I'm going to ask you one more question here, if you don't mind responding to. I want to ask you what kinds of qualities that person's influence helped to produce in you.
So I'm seeing persistence. I know this is more of a challenging question.
It is.
Helps me see myself through different eyes. Kind, strong, confidence, ambition, and drive. Strength, courage, and commitment. Perseverance. Integrity. Helpful and empathetic. Hope. Ability to access coping skills, grit, another good one.
Okay, so again, thank you so much for responding to those. And again, I feel as you're reading those responses off, Casey, and knowing those are coming from individuals who have gained some of those things, it's so powerful to think about. What I want you to remember today as we're talking about working with survivors is that you most likely are that person for someone else, and probably more than one person. And that even while our experiences with survivors are sometimes brief, that we can be a person who helps to rekindle that flame of hope and inner strength. And in some cases, that may be for the first time. So that's just a really powerful statement about the type of work that we do and the importance of taking the time to really believe in each person that we're working with. So thank you again for your sharing and for your responses. So I want to start to just give you a very general definition of strength-centered advocacy and kind of what we mean by that. I will point out that you'll see two parts to it here. And so at Friendship Home, when we started with this approach, we really started with the intention of improving our services to survivors and their children. What we weren't as prepared for was the powerful positive impact that this approach had on us as advocates. So by us, part of our approach was that we would learn about our own unique talents and those of our coworkers. And by doing that, we were able to experience the benefits firsthand. And that just created a much more natural ability for us to share with survivors the relevance and importance of focusing on strengths. So today, even though we're focusing more on how this information applies to survivors and their children, I do want to just let you know that the effect that it does have on advocates is really, really powerful. We found that it helps in enhancing the way that each of us provide advocacy, being more aware of that, keeping us connected to the personal passion that we have for doing the work, recognizing the strengths of our coworkers, and just creating a more positive and empowering work environment. So all of you know that advocacy is very rewarding and also at times very challenging work. And so this approach, we feel, has really helped to protect against vicarious trauma and burnout for us. And of course what that means is then we're able to really stay engaged and provide the best services that we can to survivors. So just a brief history of how strength-centered advocacy began. Our executive director had actually attended a conference, and that's where this all began. And so I think it was in about 1999 that she attended a conference, and there were two different workshops that she attended there. One was talking about the power of people being able to recover from trauma more effectively if they had knowledge and were able to apply their strengths. And the other part of that was a Gallup conference where they were talking about how they were just starting to make available to the public the assessment, the StrengthsFinder. And so she really kind of just started thinking about how with advocacy work, all of us, again, are working inherently from a strengths perspective, but she thought that this could really have power in the language that we could maybe use to help people talk about their strengths or be able to identify them. So in about 2000, Friendship Home received a 3-year grant, and during that time we really partnered pretty heavily with the Gallup organization. And so what they had shared with us at that point was that the StrengthsFinder had been used mostly in businesses and school settings, but that we were the first domestic violence shelter to use it with victims of intimate partner violence. And so we really did partner. We wanted to make it more relevant for the people that we were serving. And I have to tell you, and I know many of you will appreciate this, the efforts were very grassroots. So as all of you know, and I'm sure can understand, we wear lots of different hats in our roles. And so in those early years, it was really kind of squeezing in time to create materials and ideas. But we really began looking for ways to kind of underwrite time to create materials and an actual curriculum more effectively. Eventually, we were able to receive funding through a grant so that time could be spent really focusing on creating a curriculum. And so the process for creating that, again, I want to tell you, I was honored to be the person to put that together, but it was not at all my voice. It was everybody's voice. So I talked to advocates, I talked to survivors, talked to children, and really just used some surveys that I did with them, some interviews, and really kind of from all of those voices put together what we call our strength-centered advocacy curriculum. In addition to that, we designed some toolkits because we really wanted people to be able to apply the information about their strengths in ways that were really relevant. So for example, for survivors, being able to know how to apply the information about their strengths to building their self-concept, to their style of decision-making, to parenting, to how to safety plan, just lots of different things, even dealing with communal living challenges. So we really tried to design some resources that would help with that. And then we also designed toolkits for the advocates because, again, what we found early on was that we had to keep a focus on strengths on the front burner. We're all so busy as advocates doing so many different things, and so we really needed to find a way to keep doing something so that we could keep this approach alive in the midst of everything else that we were doing. The Second World Conference was really the first opportunity that we had to share this approach with other domestic violence programs. And at that point, we didn't really have anything really solidified about how we would share the information if there was interest. But there was interest, which was really great. And so shortly after that, we designed a 2-day training, which is how we have been sharing the information with programs who are interested. And the topics here kind of just give you an overview, but what I want to tell you is it's really the process of dialoguing with your coworkers and finding some really specific ways to kind of transform your program from the inside out. So that's what we really try to do. We try to have as many staff from an agency there together. It's really about organizational culture and shifting that and enhancing that rather than really just having a set of strategies that we use. So again, kind of back to at its core, it's really about 3 things: empowerment-based services, which all of you are doing, the concept of positive psychology, and then the tool that we use is the Clifton StrengthsFinder as a way to help people identify their strengths. Although you could use this approach with a different tool. That's the one that we have found to be most effective and that we use. I'm sure that many of you are probably familiar with the term positive psychology. It fits very well with empowerment philosophy and also with trauma-informed care. And it's really something that I would say as advocates we've been doing all along from the beginning. But probably in the last 15 to 20 years, there's been a much larger shift to looking at not only helping people, repair what's been broken, but really looking at, what is right within them and how they can tap into that to actually heal maybe those things that may not be doing well. And so I always stress, it seems sometimes, I don't know that any of you would be in this group, but sometimes there are people who are really skeptical about positive psychology. And so what I like to emphasize is that it's not at all about ignoring or denying problems or challenges. It's about learning what's right with us so that we can use that information to help us address those problems or challenges more effectively. So it's a really great way to look at that. I'm not going to go into great detail because there's a ton of research if that's something that you would like to look at. So for today's purposes, I just want to highlight a few things. One of them I already talked about, and that is the trauma and resiliency research that has been done that has found that people recover more easily from trauma when they know what their strengths are and are able to use them. And then also Martin Seligman, who had a quote I think that we had there on a previous slide, he also found that using personal strengths was more effective for treating depression as either traditional interventions of cognitive behavioral therapy, medication, or a combination of both. But there is in the middle there is a really interesting case study, and I do just want to highlight a few things about that for you because this was what led, with the creation of the StrengthsFinder, this is kind of the case study that led Donald Clifton, who was the developer, to really shift his focus and start to focus on studying what was right with people instead of what was wrong. And so just a summary of that study, which you can find in the book, How Full Is Your Bucket? I guess just to summarize it for you, it was shortly after the Korean War, and there was a Dr. William Mayer who conducted a study on 1,000 American prisoners of war who were detained in a North Korean camp. The death rate at the camp was 38%, which at that point was the highest POW death rate in history, but strangely enough, the reports of physical abuse were extremely low. And in fact, for many of the deaths, there was no medical cause that could be found. So doctors came up with a name for this. They called it marasmus, because so many soldiers were dying from it. The soldiers just called it give-up-itis to reflect the extreme loss of hope that accompanied those who were dying from the condition. But what I want to share with you that has striking and kind of haunting similarities to the survivors that we serve is the four different tactics that were used by the captors. The first was, the tactic was informing, And so captors would reward soldiers for snitching on one another, but no punishment followed for either soldier involved. So the intent was to destroy the relationships between soldiers and turn them against each other. The second tactic was self-criticism. So the captors would hold groups where each soldier was forced to stand and confess all the bad things they'd done and all the good things that they could have done but failed to. The third tactic was breaking loyalty to leadership and country. And the captors would slowly and relentlessly undermine the soldiers' allegiance to their superiors and to each other. And then the fourth tactic was withholding all positive emotional support. So letters would come, but the captors would withhold all the positive and supportive mail and then immediately deliver any letters that had negative news. So with those four tactics, I think you can easily make the leap between the similarities between those tactics, which led to death, and to those tactics that are used often in intimate partner violence. And so the main thing to remember about that, and again, the shift to hope, is that if we know that people entering our programs have frequently been living in an environment that is powerfully destructive, in response, we must provide an environment that is powerfully supportive, empowering, and nurturing, and one that encourages healing and hope. And that's what we're trying to do. So again, all the research is really, really critical, but I guess over the years that I've been an advocate, the thing that stands out most to me is really, the most important outcome that we have, I think, is trying to restore that sense of hope in others. There has been some research done on hope, and again, not going to focus on this, but there's a book out that was just a couple years old called Making Hope Happen, and it really kind of I guess it challenges that myth. A lot of people think hope is too soft, of a concept to be studied. But they've really found some links to well-being, success, purpose-driven action, even longevity. The hopeful thing for us is that we know that hope can be learned. So even if people don't have it in the right environment and with the right information, it can be learned. And then finally, there's 4 core beliefs that separate or that set apart hopeful people from others. The first one is really something that, according to a Gallup poll, comes naturally to most people, and that is a belief that the future will be better than the present. The second is the power that I have the power to make it so, and that's typically learned usually in early childhood. And then the other 2 come more from experiences, so believing that there are many paths to my goals and that none of them is free of obstacles. So from our experience, we have to, in order to be hopeful, we have to have a mindset that allows us to anticipate and navigate obstacles and find a new path if one does not work. So somebody I know had mentioned in their comments, persistence is one thing that had developed, and that is something that is really a powerful connection with hope, is being able to persist. Okay, so I've been talking quite a bit here. I do want to have you try something. This just kind of tells, our 3 core beliefs in strength-centered advocacy, and they seem pretty common sense, I guess. But what I want you to do right now is maybe flip a piece of scratch paper over, and I'm going to ask you to go ahead with your dominant hand, the hand you normally write with, and I want you to go ahead and write your name, your signature, 3 times. Just go ahead and write it 3 times on your paper. Once you're finished with that, I want you to switch hands and do the same thing with the hand that you don't normally write with. And I know you may still be working on that, but when you're finished, I would love for you to, in the text chat, I would love for you to kind of just respond with what was different about doing those 2 different, with your dominant versus your non-dominant. And I'm going to ask Casey to see if she can capture some of those responses of what differences you noticed.
Yeah, so people are saying frustrating. Motor control was weak. I had to put more effort. It was messy. It was very hard. I had to think about how to spell my name. I had to think a lot. Loss of control. Just very messy. So those are the common themes we're seeing.
Great, great. So yes, the first time I did this, I had some of those same responses. And so it really, really highlights, I think, the power of focusing on strengths. So when we focus on strengths, it's kind of like writing with our dominant hand. You know, for most of you, when you did that activity, you really didn't have to think about it. You just did it. Some of us even have a special flair with our signatures that we can do. I know I have a special J that I do. It doesn't take much time, and you're able to, you know, finish. When you switch to your non-dominant hand, it's kind of like working with things that are non-strengths. You can do it for most people, but it's going to take you a lot longer. You're going to work a lot harder. You're going to have to think a lot more about it. Definitely not as natural. And in most cases, although there are some who are ambidextrous, your results are not going to come out as well. And so that's just what I like to use when we talk about focusing on strengths. It's really making a decision to focus more time and energy on what's right with us, and maybe taking something good and making it excellent than, you know, focusing all our time and energy on trying to fix what is not natural for us. It's not at all saying that we don't have to do some of those things, but it's just the amount of energy and focus that we put in. And so that really forms the basis for our focusing on strengths. It's really just an intentional commitment to focus more attention on what's right about each person than what needs to be changed or fixed. And of course, we celebrate individuality, just as you do. With strength-centered advocacy, we not only acknowledge that we're different, but we celebrate it, because what's really neat is when we all have different strengths, we can join together and create more powerful and diverse teams. And finally, with our strength-centered advocacy approach, it really does begin with self-discovery. And that means, in your case, you. So again, we really found that in order to really share this in a way that was most effective, that it was the best for us to kind of know what our own strengths are, and then know that we are not the same as everybody else, and that it sort of has this contagious effect of being able to experience it and then, you know, experience that relevance and know that it really can be transformational for people. Which is kind of this quote. I think that's kind of what this is saying, is we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. So again, it has a contagious effect when we're able to focus on strengths. We can share that with others. The basic steps then for the approach are these three here. So discovery is finding, it's a starting point, but it certainly doesn't stop there. So if you help somebody discover what their strengths are or their talents are, and you stop there, they may go on their own and really do a lot more exploration on their own. But it really tends to be more superficial if you just stop there. What really has the power is helping someone discover those strengths or talents, and then helping deepen that impact by connecting it to relevant and meaningful areas of that person's life. So this is a huge part of what we try to do, is applying the information. And then lastly, the growth and evolution, what we're referring to as planting seeds for further and ongoing application. But also as an agency who practices strength-centered advocacy, we have to make that commitment to continue learning and growing in our understanding of strengths. As an agency, one thing that I always tell people is you don't have to do everything at once. It can be really overwhelming. But I just, you know, start simple and do something, and then you build it over time. The tools that we use for strength-centered advocacy there's three. And these are the ones, again, there are definitely other tools for developing or discovering strengths, but what we use are the StrengthsFinder for ages 15 through adult, and then there is the awesome StrengthsExplorer for ages 10 through 14, and then for kids who are under the age of 10, Gallup uses what they call strength spotting, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a future slide. So I want to give you just enough information to sort of understand these tools. The StrengthsFinder obviously was developed by Gallup, became available to the public in about 2001 through a book. There's about 50 years of research behind it, and again, it's for ages 15 to adults. It is an online assessment, and you purchase either a book or you can purchase an online code. They cost about $15 a person, and It's available in at least 22 languages. I believe that may be a few more now. In recent years, I think that they may have added a few more languages. So if you have taken the StrengthsFinder, you may recall this. If you have not, here's just a sample question for you to show you. They're actually more, they're not either or statements. They're more, it gives you kind of two options. So on this slide, if you can see that, it says, I want to be a CEO of a large organization. I'm a bridge builder for people. So this is just one out of about 118 paired statements. And so then you would click on which was most like you. There are some statements who, you might fit both, but there might be one that feels a little bit more than the other. There is a neutral, but I will tell you, clicking too many neutrals, and it does take quite a few before it'll register, but it will tell you that your results may not be quite as accurate. And then a big point for the StrengthsFinder is that it measures talent. Often I use the language of strengths, but really what the StrengthsFinder measures is natural talent that can be developed into strength. So this investment piece is really, really important. And by investment, we mean, once you've taken the StrengthsFinder, learning about what those natural talents are, and then finding ways that you can develop those, and also manage the areas that may or may not be considered a strength yet. So just really quickly, I want to give you an example. Two of my strengths are empathy and developer, and so that means that I can pick up and sense emotions of other people, as I'm sure many of you can. The developer means, just in a nutshell, it means that I see potential in other people. So those are definitely strengths, but they weren't always that way for me. So if you can think about how those could possibly turn against me at some point, I need, often with each strength, you need to find ways to manage areas of it that you may not necessarily see as a strength initially. Another example is there's a strength that's called command, but command, it's a real strong, powerful leadership strength that can be really amazing. But without managing it or knowing how to maybe soften some areas of it, you might be considered bossy instead of seeing that as a strength. So again, there's this concept of developing talent into strength. When you take the StrengthsFinder, you get your top 5 themes out of 34 that have been identified. You get individualized descriptions of your top 5 that are really, for a lot of people, will say they're pretty dead on. I'm not a cookie cutter approach person at all, and so you never want to make assumptions, even if you're reading somebody else's with them. You want to always ask, do you feel it fits, what doesn't? But often people say the individualized descriptions are pretty powerfully accurate. And then you also get ideas for developing each talent into a strength, which Gallup calls those action items. So the StrengthsExplorer became available in about 2007, and so that, again, the ages for that are 10 to 14. It's based on the same research, the 50 years of research, but for children and youth, obviously what you're seeing is emerging talent, and so there's 10 different themes that kids can come up with. It's also an online assessment. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and that one costs about $9.99. Here's some sample StrengthsExplorer questions. So obviously they're a little bit different, but these are some things that kids might respond to, and they would respond with these remarks at the bottom: almost always, often, sometimes, or almost never. For the StrengthsExplorer, the results, each child or youth ends up with a report with their top 3, and again, it has the descriptions for each of those. It gives action items for the child or the youth, and also for the important adults in their lives. And then it also comes with a youth workbook and a parent guide to sort of really explore different ways to kind of nurture those things. And then again, the strength spotting is basically looking at children that are younger than 10. It's really, really a powerful way that you can use strengths with anybody, but the strength spotting is based on the same 10 themes as the StrengthsExplorer, but it's really about looking repeatedly and having observations of children in a variety of different settings and interactions. So it could be with friends, it could be at the playground, in a classroom, soccer field, but you really want to look at different settings that a child is in, and there's certain things that you notice and pick up on. An interesting study found that even while personalities, of course, evolve and people change, but it has been discovered that our core personality traits are relatively stable. And there was a 23-year longitudinal study of 1,000 children, this was in New Zealand, that found that a child's personality at age 3 shows remarkable similarity to their reported personality traits at age 26. So I can very quickly, I had my daughter, because I was so excited about strengths, I had her take the StrengthsFinder, but it wasn't until she was about 13 because the StrengthsExplorer wasn't out at that point. She's 25 now. But I remember that when she was 3 years old, I used to talk, I'd be so proud of her about different things, and I'd talk with different people about what she was doing, and she would step on my foot and kind of push my foot down. And so I quickly learned that she did not like it when I did that. So I stopped doing it. I kind of tried to recognize her in different ways. But interestingly enough, when she was old enough to take the StrengthsFinder, one of her strengths, and now she's taken it again as an adult, and one of her strengths is deliberative, which is a strength that's, for a lot of people, is very much about not liking the spotlight, not liking, a lot of attention drawn to you, and liking to be appreciated maybe in different ways. So that was really an interesting situation for me to show the similarity of some of those traits at very different ages. So here's a book for you if you are interested at all in this, and it would be a really nice starting point, but it has a lot of information about all three of those, the StrengthsFinder, StrengthsExplorer, and Strengths Spotting, and then it also gives you a code for both the StrengthsFinder and StrengthsExplorer. So it's a really great resource if you're interested in kind of applying some of this information. So I do want to talk to you some, and I am going to, some of the slides that I have here, we're going to go really, really quickly through because I know that you already know much of this. But I just want to highlight very, very briefly, and you'll have this PowerPoint. But again, these are things that I know that you're already aware of and that we're not focusing too much attention on today. But some things that we know about children and youth when it comes to domestic violence is that all of them are impacted, but not necessarily all are traumatized. So we know that they experience domestic violence rather than witness it, but that they're affected in different ways and not at all the same. And as far as looking at mothers, it's really important to frame our discussions with the knowledge that mothers are often doing so many things to protect their children from the domestic violence. So we have a few things here, but really we often find that once mothers are safe, that the parenting and all the things that they're able to do increase. But we also know that even when they're not safe, that mothers are doing many, many things to protect their children. So these are just some of the effects, again, that you already are aware of as far as potential. And I really highlight the word potential because, again, they're not the same for everybody. But these are some things that, as you know, that can occur as effects for children and youth who've lived in a home with a battering parent. And here's some more. So we know that trauma affects healthy brain development, can often lead to PTSD. There's lots of different behaviors. Again, I don't want to overcover these because I know that you're aware. We do know that effects of domestic violence can be either externalized or internalized, and we know that gender can influence. So often we do see girls, because probably of the role of socialization, who maybe would have more of the internalized symptoms, and boys who have externalized, but we also know that it can be absolutely opposite. And gender does not, it influences but does not predict. And we also know that the effects can be immediate, ongoing, and long-term. So there's different types. So this poster, it does paint kind of a bleak picture, but it is the reality that for children, obviously domestic violence can have these very long-lasting and long-term effects. We also know that there are effects on mothers. We know that there's lots of different things that happen because of the domestic violence, not because of who they are. But the most important thing is that mothers are often not allowed to parent the way that they would like to, and so their natural style parenting often becomes non-existent or only is able to be present when the batterer is not there, and it's safe for them to do so. So again, it's not because the mother herself, but the effects of the domestic violence can lead to these different effects. So all of that information, even though we went through it very fast, is pretty heavy, but luckily we do know that there is another side. And that's kind of where we're shifting our focus to. I love this quote from Helen Keller because it highlights the power of resilience and hope without denying the presence of pain and struggle. So what we know about resilience is that it is that ability to bounce back and cope effectively, even in the face of great adversity, that it can sometimes transform emotional pain into something seen as positive. And again, it's very hopeful that it can be something that can be learned and nurtured and developed. We also know about post-traumatic growth, and we know that some individuals who have experienced trauma actually come through it with some changes that they can identify that they would say are positive. And so some of those changes are listed here. So some people emerge from trauma saying that they have a renewed appreciation of life. They have more of a commitment to live life to the fullest. They have improved relationships with those they love, and that they feel more open to new possibilities. They have enhanced knowledge of their strengths, and even those spiritual changes for some people take place. I think that's really powerful because I remember working with somebody who had been diagnosed with PTSD, and so she had come a long way in her healing, and when I shared this information with her, she just felt it was so empowering. She said at one point she believed that that diagnosis from what she had gone through, was something that really felt like just a stamp. And so we talked about this post-traumatic growth, and she talked about how empowering that was for her to be able to identify some ways that she truly had changed and grown. We also know that there's some characteristics of resilient children and youth, and so here are a few of those. And again, these are the things that if we can help encourage, we're actually helping to strengthen that resilience. So these are things that we definitely want to try to build into our programs and encourage. We know about some of the critical elements for healing, and these are from Lundy Bancroft and some of his work. But again, when you think about the kind of environment that we're creating, these are things that have been found to really be helpful for children who in their process of healing. And again, these are things that we want to build into some of what we're doing. I'm reviewing these because I do want to get to the information that you can really take today and apply. So I have this slide here because a lot of times mothers are judged for the actions that are listed here, but often if we look deeper, we know that these are frequently things that are done to try to help keep children safe. So again, we want to look at finding ways to help mothers be able to really strengthen that bond with their child again once they are safe. But we also want to shift thinking about when these things are taking place to help people understand that it's often to help keep children safe. And if you have questions on any of those, you can certainly ask at the end. I know I'm going through these slides pretty quickly. So this is a graphic that really highlights the most important things that we want to do is to weaken the batter's opportunity to have to abuse and have that impact on the mother and children, and then to strengthen the positive aspects of the mother's and the child's lives that enable them to resist the abuse and its effects. And that includes, obviously, strengthening that relationship with each other. And that's really our goal when we use strength-centered advocacy with children and youth and with mothers in shelter. We're trying to really rebuild that strengthened bond, which, again, is absolutely critical in the healing process. So I want to just ask you one more time to kind of reflect about your own personality traits, talents, strengths, and I want to ask you what strengths or talents that you use most in your parenting. And I recognize that not everybody may be a parent who's listening in, but I know that all of us interact with children. So what are some of the strengths that you use in your interactions with the children and youth in your life?
Okay, we've got some responses coming in. I'm seeing the ability to allow them to feel their emotions, empathy, being a good, non-judging listener, empowering my children to support them and listen to them, flexibility, adaptability, patience, pacing, being present, encouragement, compassion, humor is coming up a lot, respect, nonviolence, and a reverence for their experiences, staying calm. I like this one, allow for silence, authenticity, letting them know that they're valuable individuals, offering self-regulation tools, integrity, kindness and flexibility, and a sense of humor.
Wow, thank you so much. Those were great responses to that question, and I really appreciate your willingness to share those things. I think you probably noticed as Casey was reading some of those off that there were definitely some similarities and some shared themes. So a lot of people mentioned something along the lines of being a good listener, being empathetic or supporting, encouraging your child or children. But also there were some really unique things. So that's really what I want us to remember here is that, we are all unique. And even if we share some beliefs and ideas, each of us brings some very unique things specific about us to the way that we interact with children in our lives. And also in the way that we, those things strongly impact the way that we believe and think about parenting. And that could be whether or not we're parents ourselves. So as many of you know, beliefs about parenting are one of the most personal, and people can become very defensive and protective if they feel that those beliefs are being challenged or questioned. So it's just a really good reminder to us that we just need to be intentionally respectful and mindful in our approach when we're working with women about anything related to parenting. And part of that means that we're being self-aware of our own views and beliefs and how those things impact our conversations. So I do want to clarify with strength-centered advocacy what we mean when we talk about strengths-based parenting. So definitely one thing that we mean with strengths-based parenting is really that we want to help mothers understand how their personal strengths influence their parenting style. And this really is a huge part of empowerment because as we talked about before, a lot of times within that abusive relationship, she wasn't allowed to be, the kind of parent that she really wanted to. And so this is a way to really help her kind of reclaim or maybe claim for the first time, the type of unique talents that she brings to her role as a parent. So it's very empowering, or can be. We also want to encourage mothers to look for their children's talents and strengths. So that could be with or without the use of the StrengthsExplorer or the StrengthsFinder. But one really good reminder is that, to help moms remember that their child or children's strengths may be very different from their own. That can be, sometimes our strengths and talents are so natural to us, we just assume that everybody else is that way as well. And so often that's not the case at all. And with our children, that can be very frustrating if we think they should be acting the way that, we do, and they are actually coming from a whole different perspective. So that kind of leads into the third point here, which is really helping shift from judgment of maybe a child's misbehavior, which is a real negative focus, to understanding the child more and maybe how their unique talents and strengths really impact that behavior that you're seeing. And also that gives, a lot more tools maybe to be able to individualize the way to approach that in the most effective way. And then finally, we want to approach women from their strengths. So when we're trying to deal or address parenting issues or concerns, we really want to, look at what's most important to her, look at areas where she is strong, and so that's going to really increase the chance for positive change, and it's also going to help us to be more empathetic in our approach.
We also want to be very aware of the language that we use with each other, and often that's unintentional, but at staff meetings and office shifts, sometimes we may have, that's an honest statement, sometimes we may have judgments, and we want to be really careful about how we're talking about those issues when we're trying to approach parenting from a strengths base. That does not mean that we don't ignore situations or that we're not honest about our concerns, But we really want to do that in a way that is compassionate and honest both, in a way that honors strengths of each person that we're serving. So these are just some tips, and again, these are probably things that you're already doing, but if you are addressing those challenges, these are just some things that we talk about, is really looking at ways that we can recognize what someone's doing right before we kind of jump in with our concerns. And again, acknowledging how difficult parenting can be in shelter. Then we express our concern, and then we ask, and we invite her to kind of tell us how we can help. I'm going to skip this one, but if you have taken the if somebody has taken the StrengthsFinder, it does give you some really, really powerful information that you can actually approach, and especially if you've had a conversation about those strengths, it really can deepen the way that you're able to approach that person. So this is a quote that was on our shelter wall one year, and I found it really, really powerful. The way that we talk to our children becomes their inner voice. And so obviously, as part of our approach, we want to help repair some of the negative things that children or youth may have heard and started to believe, and really replace it with something more powerful. This is a summary of things we've already covered, so I'm not going to go too much into that at all. But these are some of the things that we really want to do in general when we're using strength-centered advocacy. This is a quote from a resident who was just talking about how powerful it was for her daughter to have taken the StrengthsFinder. And this child was very quiet and withdrawn at first when she entered shelter, but she was able to take the StrengthsExplorer. And so her mother here is talking about how that really was powerful for her and changing the way that she was able to talk with her. I think it's really powerful to see the quotes, both from the adults and then as well from the children. One thing I just want to mention here is that in the busyness of everything that we're doing, I know for myself, and this is again an honest disclaimer, but it's so easy to lose sight of children at times for some of us in the flurry of things that we're needing to do. And it's so critical that we, for example, I primarily, am working with women on counseling and different things, but it's so critical for me to help children to feel visible and valued in what I do, and I'm going to share a quick situation with that at the end. But really what we're trying to do is make sure that children feel visible and valued, so that leads them to feel more hopeful and empowered. We've already talked about most of this, about how it's built. Strength-centered advocacy is built on partnership, creating a welcoming environment, individualized. Again, we want to really meet each child where they're at and not make assumptions about them. And then finally, I'm going to have you do one more. I want you to have a familiarity of the 10 StrengthsExplorer themes, because I think this is a good way to look at the differences and the strengths and talents that each of us have. So I'm going to go through, I want you to think about the way that you were at 10 years old. And I realize that we're running out of time here, so I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can. But I want you to think about what you were like at 10 years old as I go through these 10 StrengthsExplorer themes. And as we're going through them, there's going to be a poll. And so as I'm going through these different themes, I want you to respond with whether or not this particular theme feels like it fit you at that age. And it could be a lot, it could be a little. You'll see the responses here that you can choose. Okay, so we have strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly agree, or no answer. And so we'll kind of see how many of you feel that this fits you. So achieving is a talent that children have where, again, you see it up here, they have more energy, more goals, love accomplishing. Some words to describe them would be self-starter, driven, productive, ambitious. And it looks like, by responses, quite a few of you indicated agree. So one thing, that's a pretty big number, so a lot of you were achieving. One thing that you can ask or do for a child who has achieving would be to ask them, what did you achieve that you're most proud of today? You could also help them to set their own goals that align with their particular interests, and you could find ways to showcase their accomplishments. Okay. So the next strength is called caring. And so kids that have caring as a strength would be, also words to describe them would be big-hearted, includer, friendly, thoughtful, helper. So if you want to respond to that one, and as you're responding, for a child that has caring, it would be really good to catch them being helpful, acknowledging and affirming their actions, giving them opportunities to help, and really recognizing when you see a child including somebody who may feel left out. And that may happen quite a bit at shelter. So we have a big percentage of caring, it looks like. Okay, that doesn't surprise me in this field. Awesome. Then there are children who have the talent for competing, and these are kids who just really love to win. And oftentimes, that we may not understand this completely, but for kids that have this strength, it's really, really important. They do not like losing. So words that might describe them would be winner, top performer, scorekeeper. What we really want to do with kids that have competing is to kind of, you could make studying or chores a game or a friendly competition. Really, competing is about challenging yourself. So you can help a child challenge themselves to reach a goal that they want to reach. You also need to know that with a child with competing that they may really struggle with loss, and so it's not taking that away from them, but it's helping them understand their feelings around that, and then helping them, not to give up, but to keep on competing. So another talent would be confidence. That's measured by the StrengthsExplorer. So these are leaders, risk takers, believing in yourself. For children that have, and I'm watching the chart here. Okay, great. So for kids that have confidence as a talent, asking them what they're most proud of, asking them if they've ever spoken up for something they knew was right and what happened. And again, I know that could be something that would be difficult if they've experienced domestic violence, but there are probably a lot of ways that you can help them tap into that and speaking up for what they know is right. Helping them find something new to try, because they tend to be risk takers, and then helping them find leadership opportunities. So we have about 63% of you who agreed, 11% who strongly agreed that they would maybe have had that confidence talent as kids. Okay, dependability is another one. So these kids could be described as loyal, driven, reliable, committed, independent. They're kids that really, really enjoy doing things, and trust is important to them. So we have about, well, it's kind of growing. I'll let you keep responding. So for kids that would have this talent, you would want to just really acknowledge their ability to finish or do things without being asked. Just commenting on that would mean a lot to them. Teaching them to set a good example, because they do tend to know the right thing to do. These kids tend to have a pretty good moral compass, I guess. And then giving them opportunities to take on responsibilities that match their interests. Okay, so we had about 52% for that one, and then, 38% strongly agree. There was a lot of you that had dependability. Discover would be the next one, and these would be kids that have a talent for learning. They're curious, they're interested, inquisitive. So for these kids, things that you might do is just giving them opportunities to learn whatever it is they're interested about, and just really supporting that. Asking them what they're studying or learning, either in or out of school. And also recognizing the child's interest may be intense, but they could also be short-lived. For some of them, they like just that process of learning, and then they may move on to something else. So we have a lot of discoverers, it looks like, in the audience, somewhere around 68 to 71%, and then we also 32% who strongly agree. So that's pretty powerful. And then we have the future thinkers. These would be the dreamers, imaginative, hopeful, creative, kind of visionary kids. This is really powerful when we talked about the hope earlier, and the power of kind of, being able to see a future vision. So these kids, just really helping them create a vision for the future. And it's depending on their age or their preferences, it could be really short term, that you're looking at, but it could also be longer term. So really helping them tap into what they're hopeful for in the future. And that's, we've got about 50% who agree, 32% more who strongly agree, and then smaller percent. Just a few more here. We have organizer. These are kids who love they're structured, they love to plan, they're detail-oriented often, tend to be rule followers. So some ways that you could help a child that has this talent would just be to maybe help them create a calendar. These are just simple ways. There's many, many more. But if you think about kind of the chaos that sometimes happening in that home or even in shelter, helping them create a calendar, kind of knowing what to expect, to plan ahead, and then maybe giving them opportunities to really organize or plan an event. And that one, let's see, we had 44% and 33%. So again, a lot of you are relating to these. This is great. Presence. So kids that have the talent for presence were just sort of born to sort of be, to have an audience. They tend to be performers. They tend to be outgoing, can be very influential. So one child I know that we had in shelter who had presence as one of their talents, I remember them actually wanting to create a play and get some of the other kids in shelter to be the actors in the play. Some of them agreed, some of them didn't. But then they performed the play for all of us adults, and it was amazing. So that would be one example of really supporting that child's desire to kind of, be in the front of the crowd and I guess just encouraging that performance that they did. So with a child with presence, you really just want to encourage them to practice whatever it is that they enjoy so that they keep improving and really help them find ways to use those presence talents to make a positive difference, in their family, in their school, in shelter, all those different things. And finally, we have relating. And so the relating, kids that have relating as a talent are typically really, friendship is important to them. They tend to be good friends. They're inclusive, team players, and connectors. So again, with these children, encouraging them to welcome newcomers is great, acknowledging when they're doing that, listening to a child talk about their friends, not necessarily offering advice unless they ask you for it, and then maybe just asking them about their friendships. And if they have not been able to have the kind of friendships they would like to, maybe because of what they've been through, asking them what kind of friends they would like to meet, pointing out maybe what kind of qualities they have that would be a great friendship quality. So you're still responding to the poll, and I know I am going through these real quick because I realize we're running out of time. So thank you so much. I hope that helped you to think about your own, maybe emerging talents as a child and a youth, and sort of how those are still present in you today. This is one of the children at Friendship Home talking about their strength of confidence. And so I love this because it really just gives language for what is right about this child, and it kind of gives them, maybe this awareness of how they can talk about something that's right with them. But I love this. I believe my thoughts in myself. I choose to do the right thing and can be a leader, not a follower. Some people take the wrong path, but I find my own way. Isn't that powerful? So those are the 10 StrengthsExplorer themes. And so, again, even if you don't have access to that, there are certain questions that point to talent. And these are things that you could either kind of talk to parents, to look for, or depending on the age of the child, that you could just ask them directly often. Maybe use a little bit of different language when you're asking them. But there's kind of 4 things that tend to point to talent. And so yearnings is the first one. So what activities or kinds of places do you love the most? Being able to ask that to a child or even ask a parent. What have you noticed about the things that your child loves to do? Rapid learning is another kind of indicator of talent. And so trying to look at what skills or knowledge are picked up really quickly without really having to try so hard. Remember how you wrote your signature with your dominant hand? When we're working in an area of strength, we tend to learn it pretty quickly and not have to work quite so hard. The satisfaction, so what challenges have you met that have left you feeling energized and fulfilled? That's another indicator of talent. And finally, the sense of timelessness, that would be when you're enjoying something so much that you just honestly lose track of time. So again, even if you don't use the StrengthsExplorer, these are questions that you can kind of use to sort of point you in the direction where talents lie. The the methods that I've talked to you about today are what we use here at Friendship Home, but they are certainly not the only ways to measure strengths. And I do realize some of you are probably already using, you might be using some of these tools that we've talked about, or you may be using others. And honestly, I really think a lot about grassroots, and sometimes it's just the question, trying to point out or ask people, which can be really difficult to ask people, what do you see as your strengths? It's not easy to do that often when people are coming in from a domestic violence situation, but some people still are able to do that, but often we can work with them to sort of identify. Here are a few other ways, though, excuse me, as far as children and youth. There's some websites here, and I know Casey has probably a lot more knowledge on some of these than I do. But I know the VIA Strength Survey for Children. There is also an adult version. Those are free. So if you wanted to just kind of look at that and see, that would be one.
And Julie, I can add that the Child and Youth Resilience Measure from the Resilience Research Center is also available for free, and they have several versions for both youth through adults that are available, and they're primarily a research tool, but I think they can be really useful in a practice setting.
Right. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think anything that we can do to just sort of help people look at, again, what some of those areas of strength or resilience are really incredible. Let me see here. I want to always leave you with a few application, I guess, or places to start. And so I know that I've kind of shared a whole bunch of information with you, but what I really want to focus in on now is just a few things that you could do. And so if this is something that has kind of piqued your interest or that you're wanting to learn more about, talk more about, the first things that I have here are things that you could do yourself. So I would highly suggest that if you haven't done so already, you go ahead and find, whether it's the StrengthsFinder, the VIA survey, but find some way to kind of discover your own strengths and have some language for that. And also, look at some of the research that they found if that's interesting to you. Some people aren't really much about the research, and others really need to know. But there is tons of research out there that focus on the benefits. And then, excuse me, once you know what your own strengths are, it's really great to learn about other people's. Because one of the fascinating things is often our strengths our talents are so natural to us that we just assume that other people think in that same way. And so it's really fascinating to find out that often they don't. And it's really helpful to find out what other people's strengths are, even in our inner circle, but this could also be at your workplace. I know with me it was really contagious. That's why I needed my daughter to take it when she was right at 13. I just had to know what it showed up and what she thought about those results. So as far as what your agency can do, if you haven't already, I would just suggest a dialogue with your coworkers, to talk maybe more about this, maybe look at what you're doing now. I'm sure that a lot of you are doing many things to, focus on strengths, but maybe look at, taking that even a little bit further. I definitely think it's important to involve all staff in generating ideas. So at Friendship Home, we have a strengths committee where we have people that are really just kind of natural champions and that want to really carry that torch to come together from different areas and really talk about some ideas that we can bring to all the staff. And then, of course, consider the use of some type of a strengths discovery tool. Groups are a great way. A lot of you have existing groups, so they're a great way, even without, formally using some of those tools, but they're a great way to help survivors, both adults and kids, to focus on what their strengths are. So one of the things that we do in kids groups is, and again, probably a lot of you do something similar, but we often will do art projects. So maybe they'll trace their hand or, and then on each finger they'll write something that they're really good at or something that they like about themselves. You can do the same thing with a flower. There's lots of different ways that you can bring that. For adults, again, even if you're not using the StrengthsFinder, there's different ways that you can just ask them, maybe as a check-in, asking them, what's one thing that you did right this week to help them sort of shift that focus into where they have strengths and talent. And then finally, again, we want to remember the 3 steps. So the discovery of strengths is really critical, but that's the starting point. We want to definitely find ways to help people focus on how to apply that information in ways that will be meaningful and relevant to them. And then we want to plant that seed for continuous growth and learning, and then also as an agency, we want to really make that commitment to kind of keep on growing. So I want to end, excuse me, with a story about a child, because here we have sort of the most important things that kids need, and I really think that one of the most important things for kids is just being able to be kids. But like I said earlier, I am sometimes guilty of being so busy that I'm kind of running from task to task. And I remember this particular day that I was doing that, and all of a sudden I saw this child who was kind of near the playroom, and I just stopped and I thought, I really want to take this time and just, spend maybe 10 minutes with this child. So we did. I went into the toy room and we played together and read. I ended up having a blast, and I hoped that the child did too. But later that day, on my office door, I found this. And so this is an adorable little drop that is one of my most treasured things that I have now. But part of what we do is we use these drops, which are basically just individualized appreciation. They're the notes of encouragement that we use between coworkers, between the residents in our program, and with the kids. And so I had this wonderful little note on my door that just said, Julie, with a backwards J is nice. And it was from that child that I had spent that little bit of time to play with. And so that just helps me remember and sort of close with this idea of one of the most important things about our work is just remembering why we're here, why we do this work. And so for me, that child was that reminder. And that was a really powerful reminder, and I'm so grateful for those experiences when I do slow down and just am able to connect like that with a beautiful child who made a huge difference for me as well. So there's some websites for more information if you are interested. And then here's my information if you are more interested as well. If there's anything that you're wondering about, I know we're going to have a question and answer period here, but if there's anything that you are wondering about, if you're more interested, want to talk to me a little bit more, you could definitely use, oh good, I didn't see my email at first, but it just had jumped down to another line. You could do either email or phone, and I would love to talk further with you. So with that, yes, go ahead, Kate.
Well, I was just jumping in to really thank you enthusiastically for all of the amazing tools and tips and resources that you shared today. It seems like people are really excited about the approach that you're taking and really thinking about how they can integrate it into their own programming. So I do want to encourage people to chat any questions that you have for Julie in the public chat. Because, like she said, she is here and available to respond to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Kate.
Sure. So Colleen wants us to go back one slide. There we are. It looks like she wanted to get these website resources. I also want to share, a lot of people were asking during your presentation, Julie, if they would be able to get these slides afterwards, and the answer is absolutely yes. Yeah. We will be sending out a follow-up email with the slides, with a recording, and with any additional resources that you'd like to offer to everyone, Julie, that you think might be helpful.
Sure.
Great. So I'm not seeing any questions come in. You did give us a lot to think about, a lot to digest, and just a really helpful, positive, asset-based model for doing this work. So we're very excited to have it to think about today. Yes, people are saying a ton of helpful info. Thank you. So I am going to, since no questions are coming in, I'm going to ask you, Julie, if you have any additional or concluding thoughts that you'd like to share before we close today.
I think just the final thing, again, is recognizing all the powerful work that all of you are doing and thanking you for that, and realizing that this, what I've shared today is just, it's one way I believe, a very powerful way to enhance, those things that you're already doing. And so, again, the biggest thing that I talk about with this approach, I've really shared a lot of information in a short amount of time with you. But yeah, as you said, sort of letting it digest and sink in, and then as there are questions or thoughts, please feel free to share those. But really it is about just starting with something. So even if it's that dialogue that you have with your coworkers, even if it's you deciding you're going to go ahead and take this StrengthsFinder if you haven't done so, kind of see what you think about it. Maybe have your child take it if you have children or a child in your life that you really would like to. But really that's where I'd say is the starting point, because from there is where you'll be able to experience that benefit, and then you'll be able to probably just really see some of those powerful benefits that can come from using it with survivors. So I am so excited and grateful to have the opportunity again to spend your very valuable time today with you, and I thank you, Casey, and everybody there at the National Resource Center for allowing me the chance to do this as well. And again, thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you, Julie. Well, I just want to also express some appreciations for all of my colleagues and supporters here at the NRCDV, to Justine, to Yvonne, to Patty, and Brecken, who are all here with me today. And thank you, Marilee, for your diligent and amazing captioning skills. We appreciate your efforts to help make this webinar accessible. And thanks, Julie. We so appreciate you and the model that you're sharing. Let's keep this conversation going throughout the month of April, which we know is Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month, in addition to Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And the third week in April has been recognized as Child Exposure to Violence Awareness Week. So let's spread the word about these important topics. And please feel free to reach out to the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence if you'd like more information about the ACEDV project and how we can support your work. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. That concludes today's webinar.